The pick is in for the Jacksonville Jaguars, their second selection in the first round of the 2020 NFL Draft, and it's K'Lavon Chaisson, the defensive end and linebacker from Louisiana State University. Instant analysis on Jaguars.com and Jaguars social media. JP Shadrick with you, John Oehser, Brian Sexton, Ashlyn, Sullivan, full team coverage here. The Jags went CJ Henderson at corner with number 9. They go pass rusher, but he can go cover. He's going to tell you, and you'll hear him throughout the next the weeks ahead, say he can do a lot of different things for this defense. Brian, let's start with you. This guy has some versatility. His story, the way he worked his way into a role at LSU, is pretty strong. And the guy on a big stage, a lot of different times for LSU in a championship year, came up big on defense.
Well, my memory of him is watching him dominate the line of scrimmage and really push the pocket in that game against Oklahoma in the college football playoff game. I think he had 6 tackles and 2 sacks that night. Everything I hear is he has freak-level athleticism. In other words, they can put him on the edge, they can move him around, and he can make things happen. Now, interesting to me is what this means for Yannick Ngakoue.
Yeah.
He hasn't signed his franchise tender. There have been stories all day, started last night, that the Jaguars were working on something, and it might not come to fruition on day one of this draft. Are they setting themselves up to have that next pass rusher in there, or is this just accumulating pass rushers? I think the level of the relationship between the player and the club right now is such that you can assume that they're planning on moving on when they go ahead and use the 20th pick on a 6'3", 255-pound pass rusher. Seems to me like they've made their move forward.
We'll see what happens in the coming hours and days there. John Oehser, Jaguars.com senior writer with us. Another defensive pick, another Southeastern Conference player. And this will be interesting to see where he kind of fits on this defense moving ahead.
Well, in reference to what we just talked about, you're darn right they're planning on moving on. And now they are 2 bookend pass rushers. Can get leads, which it hasn't been able to do very often in recent years. They can get leads. You got to figure these 2 guys, Allen and Chaisson, can close the door. I think what's interesting, everything you hear about Chaisson is that he sounds like a kid who came to LSU, worked. It sounds like he's a high character guy. You don't know him yet, but that's what it sounds like. Josh Allen, high character. It's clear to me that was a priority for these guys. They want no more drama. They want this to be a clean slate, a team that gets along, that likes ball, all those things you hear. This feels to me like that. It feels to me like CJ Henderson, who we talked to a minute ago, quiet kid, very reserved. I think that's the direction they're going. I wonder now, when they go defensive tackle, it's tough to get quality defensive tackle after the first round that can contribute right away. I also think at some point they've got to go wide receiver pretty soon.
We'll see what happens down the line. Speaking of his story off the field, well, on the field at LSU, he wore the number 18 jersey. That's a tradition that goes back to 2003 when Matt Mock led the Tigers to their first national title since 1958. And that became synonymous with a player on and off the field there with a selfless attitude and doing a lot of things right. So they don't hand that out to everybody. And Ashlyn Sullivan's with us now. This guy does have a good track record off the field. And I'm curious to see what the fans think about this one tonight, too.
Yeah, absolutely. We go back to when we talked to Doug Marrone a couple of weeks ago, and he said he preached the importance of bringing non-drama into this locker room. That's exactly what this seems with this pick. 3-time member SEC academic honor roll. And the story of how he got to LSU is absolutely crazy. He goes to support his friend who is training in a summer camp. He has no cleats, no shorts, goes on the field. They're so impressed with his athletic ability. They offer him a scholarship. He works his way into LSU. So it definitely seems like he's a hard worker. Josh Allen tweeting, "It's going to be a movie. Welcome, Joe Schobert, Flames." Definitely seems like the youth of this defense is extremely excited to have him.
Our instant coverage presented by Pepsi and Papa John's. K'Lavon Chaisson, the pick from Louisiana State University, the national champions. And now the Jaguars have a couple of defensive players in the first round, CJ Henderson at number 9 and Chaisson coming in at number 20. Let's touch a little more, guys, on this, what this means. And, Brian, you brought it up first. John, you echoed it as well. What it means moving forward for the Yannick Ngakoue situation. Well, it does feel like that this is the start of what's next in the 91 situation and what the future will be for Chaisson. Brian, what do you think?
Well, the old story about Cortez. When the Spaniard landed on the shores of Mexico back in the 14th century, he burned his boats, right? It was telling his men, hey, there's no going back now. Well, essentially, that's what Unique Ngakoue did with the tit for tat with Tony Khan the other day. I mean, that was it as far as I was concerned. He was burning his boats. In Chaisson, you get a second consecutive premium position player in the first round. Remember, we said there were 5, 3 on offense, quarterback, wide receiver, offensive tackle, 2 on defense, pass rusher, cornerback. For a defense that struggled last year, now they struggled more against the run, but for a defense that needed to replenish itself, it got 2 premium players with the first 2 picks. And I understand people are not overly thrilled with this. This isn't a quarterback, which is the sexy pick. There wasn't a lot of trading, moving around, accumulating more picks, which had been the story. But the Jaguars got a premium position in a corner who is long, athletic, and aggressive, and seems, by all accounts, Matt Miller from Bleacher Report has said he's the best cover guy, and I trust Matt's opinion. And now you get a guy to chase the quarterback with Josh Allen on the other side. Kind of like this. This is not what I anticipated, but I kind of like where this thing has gone so far tonight.
John Oehser, this guy had a medical redshirt year. He tore an ACL early in the 2018 season, came back from that for a strong 2019, of course, and as Brian alluded to earlier, the defensive player of the game in the national semifinal a year ago. This is the type of athlete I think Todd Wash likes too, right, on the defensive side of the football, a guy that can rush, that can cover if he needs to, has that mentality about it.
Well, you're back to where, if there had been a knock on Unique, it was size. He's not a prototypical defensive end and wasn't elite against the run. Now you're back to having a little better size at the 2 positions, and you feel more like you have 2 prototypes. One thing that I was thinking about after we talked to Henderson earlier, the Jaguars were in a situation where they didn't have elite level talent on all 3 levels of the defense anymore. Once they had gotten to Ramsay, all of a sudden that back 4 didn't have prime position back there. They had Trey Herndon, who was a free agent, but didn't really have that first round pick. Now they're back to the point with Miles Jack on one level, with these 2, Chaisson and Josh Allen on the front level, and then you have Henderson on the back level. Now you're getting back to where when you look at this defense overall, there is premier frontline talent, supposedly playmaking, game-changing talent on all 3 levels. Tough to win defensively if you have that formula.
There's no doubt about that. And it happened quickly for this Jaguars organization where they had that talent, and it kind of moved away the last couple of years, trying to replenish that starting tonight. And with 10 more picks in this draft and then a handful of picks next year, too, the next 2 years are key to get that done. Ashlyn, this is a defensive draft so far. I'm curious what your thoughts would be moving ahead here. We've mentioned some other needs, and there's a new offensive coordinator in town. Gardner Minshew's the quarterback right now. What's going to happen now moving ahead? At some point, the offense needs to get some love too.
Well, I think we all can expect that they're going to need to address wide receiver in day 2. And we go back to the NFL Combine when I was there with John. And I know fans at this point are kind of upset that the Jaguars hadn't picked a wide receiver in round 1. I'm seeing, DJ Chark's going to get double teamed now. But the word in Indianapolis at the Combine was this wide receiver class is so deep. There might not be a need to go ahead and pick up a Jerry Jeudy or a CeeDee Lamb on day 1 because there really isn't that much of a drop-off in day 2. You still have a ton of wide receivers on the board. So I think we definitely can expect that day 2. But to get 2 premium defensive guys, especially needs for the Jaguars, I think this is a win so far, day 1.
Yeah, let's review a little bit. Let's go back to that number 9 overall pick, CJ Henderson, the cornerback from the University of Florida, a guy who came onto the campus in Gainesville and right away made an impact as a freshman and then just got better and better as it went on. He can cover, he can hit guys, he can run with it. He runs a 4.39. John Oehser, this is a great addition for this Jaguars defense, obviously in a place where they were looking for a guy to come in right away and start.
But yeah, again, they had run out of 2 or 3 years ago. They had playmakers all over the back end of the defense. Last year, they didn't have any in the back end of the defense, quite frankly. So now they have one. He's a premium guy. Listening to him on the conference call with the media, incredibly reserved. This guy is not Jalen Ramsay in terms of personality. And he was asked about that a couple of times. He trash talks a little bit, he says, but it's more about when he feels he's being disrespected. You get the idea that he doesn't start, meaning he doesn't start a whole lot of one-on-one conversation on the field, if you will. But he's the guy who wants to pitch it with his play. Again, just back to what we talked about. I think this team really doesn't want the drama, maybe not the over-the-top trash talking of the last 3 or 4 years, and they would be a calmer situation where they know what to expect every day. CJ Henderson feels like he fits that, and he's prime talent. He needs to be a starter right away. And again, I would be surprised if the first time this team practices, if he's not very close to being one of those guys who's a starter from day one or certainly before the season starts.
Brian, we touched on this earlier tonight on the history of drafting corners in the first round for this organization is not too deep at all. Only a couple of others all time, and only one other one this side, and that was Ramsay, and that was earlier in this draft. So, in the draft. So, is it fair to compare Henderson to Ramsay? I know the personalities are different. How do you deal with the comparisons that will naturally come?
I don't think you really can. I don't cover Florida, so I hadn't been on the practice field. I remember when I went to Tallahassee in 2016 for Jalen's pro day. The very first thing that struck you about Jalen was how big he was. And I'm not just talking height, he's 6'3", but I'm talking how wide his shoulders were. I mean, wide, and how long his arms were. It's not a fair comparison, I don't think, because they're not the same person. Now, in terms of production, well, I think you can start talking about what he's capable of producing. If I read right, he gave up 1 touchdown in his career man-to-man in Gainesville. Okay. Now you start talking about a guy who plays at a very high level. But remember, Jalen traveled with the very best receivers that this team saw week to week. I don't think you'll see that with Henderson as a rookie. In fact, I would be stunned if you saw that as a rookie. I guess we'll have to wait and see what he is. But no, I don't think the comparisons to Jalen are accurate, because for all that Jalen left us with, which was a lot of crap to have to deal with, to be honest with you, he was a tremendous physical specimen and is, if not the best corner in the game, he is one of the top 2 or 3 corners in the game. This kid has to come in and establish himself. Production-wise, I think you can say it. How they use him, Jalen just had so many physical gifts and attributes. They could do different things with him than they could with normal players. I don't know whether Henderson could, because remember, none of us got to see him at his pro day because there wasn't one.
Let's get our final thought from one of our resident Gators on this call, and the most recent resident Gator on this call. Ashlyn, you like it?
I do. I think it's an overall need, and you talk about, it's an incredible opportunity for him with Trey Herndon and DJ Hayden. For him to come in, Maurice Jones-Drew said he's going to come in and he's going to be your number 1 corner. I mean, for him to come in and just fill that hole, it's an obvious hole. I don't think we all expected it to be addressed at number 9, but it obviously is something of importance to Dave Caldwell. And I think about it, with Trey Herndon, DJ Hayden, that really isn't a good enough secondary. So to address it right away, it's an incredible opportunity for him. We'll see if he takes advantage of it.
All right. That'll do it for our coverage of the 20th overall pick. CJ Henderson goes at number 9, the cornerback from Florida. K'Lavon Chaisson, the defensive end and linebacker from LSU, coming in at number 20. Our post-pick coverage presented by Pepsi and Papa John's. Look for the rest of the coverage coming up on Jaguars.com in the next hour or so. We will also have a wrap-up podcast coming up at the end of the night on the Jaguars official podcast channels. For Brian Sexton, John Oehser, Ashlyn, Sullivan, and our entire crew, I'm JP Shadrick. That'll do it for our coverage for now. The Jaguars have a pick at number 20, K'Lavon Chaisson from LSU.